So welcome everyone, and we'll get started with the news. First, some genuine astronomy news. Jupiter is going into retrograde starting June 19th through October 18th. This is essentially, from our perspective here on Earth, we'll see that Jupiter moves backwards across the sky for a while before going forwards again. This is normal, happens every time that, we and Jupiter orbit at different rates at different distances. So not a biggie, but hey, somebody was hyping it, so I thought I'd mention it. June 24th will be the last supermoon of 2021. It is the, as Native Americans refer to it, the strawberry moon. Remember, a supermoon is just the coincidence of the moon when it's full and at perigee, its closest point in orbit to the Earth. So for those that are into supermoons are
June 24, right?
June 24th. Supermoons are only about 15% brighter and 10% closer. So they happen all the time. But this is the last one for 2021. Oddly enough, coming out of LIGO, the gravitational wave detector here in the US, there's two of them. They believe that through analysis of LIGO data, they've confirmed that the merging of black holes increases their spin, which might reduce their surface area because things can't fall in as easily. So it's not confirmed by other gravitational wave observatories, but LIGO does have multiple observations, so it's confirmed in multiple observations. But it'll be interesting to see, because they thought that, black holes don't get any smaller, but it looks like if a black hole, which is spinning at a certain rate, sucks in another black hole, which is spinning at a faster rate, it'll increase the spin rate of the black hole, and it might reduce its surface area. I think, though, that if you're taking two black holes and merging them, the black holes should get larger, but new science, we'll see.
It's the whole deal is that now you have the generated matter that is in the black hole, because the black hole is actual object.
Yes.
Because it's being compressed, because more gravity, it becomes the volume inside of it's smaller. So that's a calculation that happens with white dwarfs, with some of the planets, like Saturn is way much lighter than Jupiter, but Jupiter and Saturn are equivalent in size, because Jupiter has more mass and the mass is compressed together until it becomes degenerated matter. And then Saturn, it's a little bit larger for its mass because the mass is more relaxed. There is not much compression. So that's how it works.
Yeah, I think the astrophysicists need to talk to the mathematicians and say this is one of those cases where 1 + 1 is less than 2.
Yeah. But to understand that on the black hole, it was very difficult, and it took that long for you to prove only with the LIGO, and it was something postulated by Hawking
in the 1970s.
He himself wasn't sure.
Yeah. So there's a computer that was originally built in the 1980s that is having a problem. Hubble. Hubble may have a bad memory board, and that's causing the flight control computer, not the science computer that takes the images, but the actual steering of the space telescope and pointing it at targets and such. That computer shut itself down, saved itself, and they're having difficulty getting it to reliably start back up. So it may not be the gyroscopes of Hubble that seals its fate. It may be an alpha particle that hit a memory chip and made it where the memory is no longer functioning properly, and there's kind of no way around it. Strangely enough, for a number of years, dynamic RAM memory chips had a problem with alpha particles, causing them to get bit errors. I know, because I wrote some of the software.
Beta particles?
Yes, I wrote some of the software for an operating system once that actually, if it detected a single bit parity error, would retry the memory request. And if it didn't fail the second time, it was attributed to an alpha particle striking the ceramic of the outer shell of the DRAM chip and causing it to flip the bit. And if you just read it again,
In that case, it's beta particles.
okay,
Not always, it's
if you just read it again, the problem goes away, which is, it's kind of like the extra energy didn't actually flip the bit, it just added more energy to the sense interface of the bit, causing, you know, a 1 to be a 0 or a 0 to be a 1. Well, if they found out a few years later that if you just coat the top of the integrated circuit with a particular kind of plastic, and then you make the ceramic outer coating on it, problem goes away. But the software continues to exist today in most operating systems to, oh, we've got a single bit parity error. Read it again. Oh, no more error. Okay, let the software run. So Hubble doesn't have that protection, and Hubble sits in space where there's a lot more radiation. So it's now got basically a bad memory board. And if they can't figure out a way to software around it, that may be the end of Hubble.
A question.
Yes.
Okay, so Hubble has this problem. Now I know they've gone out in space and fixed other crafts and stuff. Is
Yeah.
Hubble too far away?
No, Hubble's not too far away. We just don't have any manned orbiting spacecraft called the space shuttle that we could package up some repair parts and send it up there to fix it.
We don't have. Well, we have something up there that we have spacemen go up to, right? The astronauts go up there.
That's the International Space Station.
Yeah.
It's orbiting at a different altitude and a different speed and in a different place than Hubble.
And they have docking systems. Hubble doesn't have a docking system.
Ah, see, that's a good point.
Hubble is smaller. It doesn't, you can't dock with Hubble and go on board Hubble, but Hubble does have a capture arm on it. It's basically a post sticking out that the space shuttle, when it would go up to service Hubble, would actually reach out with its arm and grab a hold of Hubble, and then the astronauts could go out on the arm and work on Hubble. And Hubble has two giant sort of doors that open up, and you can get into the electronics compartment and replace entire modules.
They've been up there just to work on Hubble before. That I thought
a couple of times, yeah, a couple of times.
There was some astronaut that hit it, like he was trying to get the
Story
thing.
Musgrave, yeah, yeah.
What was his name?
Story Musgrave, yeah.
Yeah, that was so funny.
But we don't have a space shuttle anymore, so we don't have something we can fly over to Hubble with an arm and grab it. Actually, that's not exactly true. It's not a manned spaceship, but the US military does have, you could think of it as a 1/3 size space shuttle that they do use for secret missions. And it does have a little cargo bay, but I don't know if it has an arm in it or not. But it would have to replace the module in Hubble autonomously without people. And the last Hubble servicing mission had a problem that they left the metal doors open long enough that they actually changed in size due to solar heating. And when they went to close them back, they didn't quite fit. So they had to wait a little while for them to cool down, and they had to like slam the doors shut and then clamp them closed. So I don't think that spontaneity of function is going to happen if it's a completely robotic mission.
So so what happened to the shuttle? I mean, is that what happened, that it didn't function anymore?
No, we decommissioned the shuttle. We don't fly the shuttle anymore. It was identified as being too much of a hazard to the astronauts. We had 2 shuttles that we lost. And at the same time, it was a lot more money to launch the shuttles than they thought they were going to save. So it wasn't as cost effective. SpaceX's launch vehicles are capable of being manned and going to the International Space Station, but they don't have the scale of vehicle to service Hubble. Now, people have suggested that when SpaceX gets its very large launch vehicle up and running and going into orbit, that instead of having an arm to capture Hubble, the SpaceX craft could actually open its doors and engulf Hubble and bring it back, which would be interesting.
Awesome to have that piece of museum.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be so wonderful.
But you know,
Save Hubble to be in a museum. That would be awesome.
it's just a well, once you get
dream.
that big starship up and running, it's got a cargo bay. Can't you just open it up and grab Hubble? And somebody said, well, we don't have an arm to do that. Well, why don't you just like engulf it, grab it, you know, gobble it, so to speak, and then bring it back? It has to be strapped inside the starship to avoid it bouncing around and destroying itself. So, but the starship will have people on board. So maybe people on tethers can go up there and grab it and stow it in the bay. And
The Hubble has a deorbiting system, so like something that they did in the last mission with the
Yes.
fixing. They put the back. They have like handles that they put on the back. That's the deorbiting system,
yes,
just in case you have the control or deorbiting.
here's the problem.
Necessary.
If it's the control computer that is
No,
not
it's not.
starting,
It's like a gear. It's like a mechanical gear that you just grab it and has something to hold.
yes, that's the docking. Docking. It's the grapple adapter. Okay, SpaceX launched another GPS satellite, the 4th of 10. This is the 3rd generation of GPS satellites. The unique thing was that this is the first time that the Air Force allowed them to launch a GPS satellite using a previously flown booster. So even the US Air Force is taking advantage of the cost saving of flying previously used boosters. They used to require that SpaceX would do a test fire of the first stage prior to approving the launch. And now it looks like because the booster flew before and they didn't find anything serious during the recuperation of it, that I guess it's just as good as if you test fired it. So look for more optimizations to occur there. Hopefully they don't over optimize and cause problems. But anyway. So on Thursday of this week, China launched 3 astronauts to man their newest space station. So the Earth now has 2 orbiting space stations that have people on board. Their space station is smaller than ours is, but they can grow theirs as well.
Didn't we have a Chinese guy go on one of our up to the space station?
I know we've had Japanese. I don't know if we've had Chinese or not. I'd have to look
I
that up.
don't remember.
I don't remember.
Well, I don't know if they would have been from China though too. It might have been like a Chinese American or something. You know, if somebody from America that was had a different.
That could have been. Have to look that up.
But we don't have a relationship with China to be on the space station.
No. We do with Russia, but Russia's now saying maybe not for much longer.
That would be sad.
I agree. It's not like they're going to take their modules back.
Mondo, how high is the Chinese station?
I don't know its actual altitude, but I would assume it's a similar altitude to the ISS. You want it up high enough where its orbit doesn't degrade too quickly, but you don't want it up so high that it takes a lot more rocket to get up to it.
Mm.
So I'd say about 200 miles.
Is it a good thing to have 2 of them
What
up
is the
there?
altitude of the Chinese space station?
Yes, it is good to have more than one space station up there, because if for whatever reason a problem occurs or it gets struck by something and puts it out of commission, it's nice to have a backup. We do a lot of not only space technology research, but also industrial process research and just observing that we do with the International Space Station, that if it were not there, we would feel its absence.
So Tiangong is 264 miles, and the International Space Station is 254. So 10 miles. Oh no, 10 miles of difference.
Yes.
That's
But
awfully close.
as I said, they're roughly the same altitude.
Yeah,
10,
close.
10 miles higher.
Well, they're probably on similar orbits,
Yeah.
although the China space station probably is in orbit more tilted so that it's in longer contact with their own ground stations. Whereas the US has, multiple networks of ground stations.
Now, this is hypothetical. I know there's no way to tell the answer to this in a way, but based on the past history of China, their ship right now up there is brand new.
Yes. Yes, it's brand new and probably has some slightly newer technology on board than does the space station, the ISS.
The ISS has, probably it's gonna last maybe. It was supposed to be gone this year,
Yes.
but they extended maybe for one more decade or more. But it's the space station needs to be renewed. There's a lot of systems there.
They're replacing the solar
Production
they're replacing the solar panels on the space station. They replaced one set of them today. Because we can go up there and service it and do things like replace the solar panels, that's what extends its basic life. So we put up solar panels that will last longer and produce more electricity. But does anybody ask the question about, okay, what do they do with the old solar panels? They basically toss them aside, and eventually, because they're such large flappy things, they degrade in orbit and fall back and burn up. But to get from 200 miles down to 70 miles, you've got to pass through a lot of satellite orbital layers.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I
Yes.
have no idea.
Collisions will be occurring.
Yes.
I'm
So,
sure.
but it's large enough that they'll track it on radar. I wouldn't worry about the Starlink satellites from SpaceX because they have
Sure.
maneuvering control and can get out of the way of things when they see them coming. So in the world of space tourism, you've probably heard of the multiple, the multi-billionaires that have their own space tourism programs. A more fledgling one is started up called Space Perspective. And they're going to charge tourists to launch them via helium-filled balloons to 100,000+ feet in 2024, and then they'll land in the Atlantic Ocean and be picked up. Right now, their launch complex is in Florida. So Florida has multiple launch complexes, and we'll get to that in a little later at the end of the news. So LIGO, the Gravitational Wave Observatory, we have two of them here in the US. They use giant mirrors to essentially bounce a split phase laser beam off of them to determine when gravity waves occur. These giant mirrors are extremely reflective and smooth surface. They weigh 88.2 pounds each, and they're now cooling them to 77 nanokelvin. This is very close to the point where atoms don't move around much. I don't know where the minus signs went, but it's minus 273 degrees Celsius or minus 459 degrees Fahrenheit. These are the largest objects ever to be cooled so low. And what they found out is that the typical quantum effects that you would expect to see when you cool very tiny things this low don't seem to be occurring. In other words, things like the electrical conductivity and the magnetic fields don't seem to be occurring on objects this large. So put a push
But
pin in that. We'll follow it.
Monroe, did you read how they're cooling the mirrors?
That's the funniest thing, is they're dynamically cooling the mirrors by nudging them with lasers to push the atoms to make them not move as much. They cool them with liquid helium cooled by liquid nitrogen on the outer layer.
How big are they?
They're about, I guess, 14 inches across. But
Wow,
they
that's pretty
weigh
big.
they weigh 44 kilograms. They're substantial pieces of matter.
Because the stuff that I read about, quantum cooling with lasers
Mhm.
is only like a couple of atoms for
Yes.
you to study. Yeah, that's
Yes.
interesting. And that's
Yes.
new stuff.
Yes. But they actively mitigate vibration in the material. The funny part was they have to put very low energy into the lasers, otherwise it'll actually stimulate the atoms to move. It'll nudge the atoms. Another one of those photonic propulsion kinds of things.
What is the mirrors used for?
When you split the laser beam, you have one phase beam and another phase beam, and you send the beams down 4-kilometer evacuated tubes. And at the end of the tubes, you put the laser beam, and that sends the laser beam out, reflects it back, and both beams come back. And if they're perfectly coincident, then you have no phase differential, and the phases
Oh,
cancel each other
that's
out.
LIGO, right?
It's a Michelson interferometer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
So-
for gravitational waves.
Yes, that's how they measure gravitational waves. If one tunnel gets a little longer than the other, then that creates an interference pattern. And on the backside of the splitter, they'll detect that in a photomultiplier tube. So it detects the light differential between the two tubes. And they're now detecting it to a small portion of the diameter of a proton.
That's freaky.
Yeah. So next week, we'll actually talk about how LIGO works, and we'll get into that minutia of how LIGO works. And it's pretty fascinating that they can actually get an object to not just not swing, not move, but to get the atoms to start slowing down and not moving as much. So for those that are into bling, the third largest ever mined diamond was discovered in Botswana. It's a 1,000 carat rough stone.
Holy crap.
It's like a
I don't want to be
it's
the
like a
person who's
large
gonna
size
crack that
baked,
one.
it's like a large size baked potato in physical size. Just remember, there was once a very, very large diamond, and they just couldn't quite get it right, so they kept carving it down. And that's still the largest diamond. So at one time, we thought this prehistoric fish called the coelacanth was extinct, until off of the southeastern coast of Africa, they actually found some. Well, they've been studying them, and originally they thought, oh, they live to be about 20 years old. No, apparently they've done some genetic analysis and found out that coelacanth lived to be about 100 years old. And what's even more fascinating, they found coelacanth pregnant, and they discovered that a coelacanth is pregnant for a gestation period of about 5 years.
Whoa, I don't want to be in that position.
Yes, so talk about slow metabolism. Yeah. This may explain how they survived their own extinction. They just needed a couple of them left, and they'll breed, and another few hundred years and the population will increase. So in another one of those, you have to pay attention to the hype of the fine print. They've uncovered fossils in China. There are prehistoric rhinoceroses, or rhinoceri. They're 20 feet tall and they weigh 20 tons. I don't think they have the full fossil to judge this to a high degree of accuracy, but let's just say even at if they had a femur and they judged them to be 20 feet tall, they would be more than 10 tons, making them the largest land mammal to ever exist. Not largest prehistoric creature, just the largest land mammal. And in a bit of environmental news, 41 of California's 58 counties have now declared a drought state of emergency affecting 30% of the state's population. If you follow the hyperlink, you can actually see a marina at a lake in California where there are no boats anymore. The boats got out before the lake completely dried up. So you see these 100+ boat slips and there are no boats, and what used to be a lake is now all dried lake bed. For those that are following the Pentagon's UFO report, it is due to be released on June 25th. I don't get my hopes up that, they will proclaim extraterrestrial existence. I think it's just going to be, yep, they're real. Nope, we don't know what they are and we don't know where they come from. Could be the Russians' hypervelocity missiles. Could be something China had. Be afraid, be very afraid. Give us more military budget money.
So I have a name for the report, the Juno report.
The Juno report?
No, Juno.
Oh, the
Can I
Juno
just
report.
ask about the report before about Arizona and the dried up water? Do we know what caused that?
Yes, it got really, really hot and really, really dry for a lot of years.
Okay, and this is bad news.
Yes, it is. Especially for all those boaters that used to pay for those slips. It's bad news for the boaters. It's bad news for people that want to drink water in California. It's bad news for the revenue that the state of California used to make off of those boat slips. There's no good news in it. But I was watching Bill Maher last night, and it turns out that almonds require an enormous amount of fresh water in order to make your almond milk or your almond joy bar or your diamond almonds that you eat. Bill was suggesting maybe the state of California doesn't need almonds. Have some other state that has a lot more water grow almonds.
Well, one of the problems they had many years ago, and I don't know if it changed, but when I lived in California, they were growing a lot of rice in San Francisco. They were growing a lot of rice.
Yeah,
and that took a lot of water.
I don't know that you watched Bill Maher, but he had a graph last night that showed how much water is required for certain things. And almonds were many, many times any other agricultural crop.
Really? Wow.
For a nut that's so dry, why does it require so much water? It's because almonds are grown on trees, and the tree has to be large in order to produce crops of almonds. So you need a lot of water to grow the tree that big. I think that's why they need all the water.
So usually other kinds of nuts are grown on bushes or vines?
No, they're grown in pods. For example, cashew nuts. Cashew nuts are not grown separately on a tree as nuts. They're grown in a giant seed pod, which can store moisture. So the tree doesn't need to be anywhere near as big in order to have a crop of cashews. And peanuts are underground. They're root nodules. So they can use the ground moisture. I guess walnuts grow on trees open too, but walnuts are enclosed in hard shells. Almonds are too, but they're smaller. They're more exposed to the open air. So I'm not a horticulturist. Horticulturalist. I don't study almond growth. So
You just say you're not a nut specialist.
some people just think I'm nutty, but no, I don't know a lot about them. And
Yeah,
last,
I was, in my search, I was looking for that, and then I knew that, but now I'm on oats. Oats is much better for the environment.
yes, oats don't require anywhere near as much water to grow as almonds. And last of our news items, I've been taking note of how many spaceports the US has got. Now that we have this booming industry of private commercial space programs, they're creating these things called spaceports. So wherever you have a large commercial airport or a chunk of open land, private concerns are going in and spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to create factories to build spacecraft and launch complexes and return pads. And this week they announced that the one that they're planning for the state of Georgia is about to be approved by the FAA. They're literally taking land out on the edge of a swamp, filling it in and putting in the industrial complexes and the launch complexes to have a spaceport. I think it's actually called the Camden Spaceport. But I just found it fascinating that we're growing this large crop of commercial space launch ports. I don't know that every one of them is going to have a rocket capable of, manned launches. Some of it's just, maybe they're even reusable, maybe they're not reusable. I know there's one launch vehicle that doesn't actually launch as a rocket from the ground. It hangs underneath a giant airplane and launches from aerospace. So different technologies, different commercial opportunities. So I was thinking maybe future one of our sessions I'll do on comparing and contrasting in the progress of U.S. commercial spaceports as identified by the U.S. FAA. So that's the news. Any other news items that I might have missed?
Oh, the only one is related to our presentation.
A news item?
Yes, that Juneteenth became now a holiday.
Yes, Juneteenth has been recognized for over 100 years as a celebration item, but it has not been a U.S. official federal holiday. As of Thursday of this week, Juneteenth or June 19th is an official U.S. holiday, just like the 4th of July, and it's celebrated in a similar manner. But if you know about U.S. federal holidays, they are celebrated on the Friday before or the Monday after if the actual date numbered holiday falls on a weekend. They wanted to celebrate Juneteenth this year, the first year that it becomes official, and they're not going to do it today, which is a Saturday. So they did it yesterday. So it became very short notice U.S. federal holiday notification, and a lot of large corporations were like, what do we do? How do we do this? Because they weren't prepared to give people the day off or, to make it an official holiday. Company holiday calendars are usually identified 6 months or more in advance so they can plan for all of the necessary operational aspects of their business and any differences in salary payments. So it came as kind of a surprise, but it's not that it should be that big a surprise because this particular request for it to be a federal holiday has been roaming around the U.S. Congress for a while. It's just we have the right people in office at this point for it to be finally recognized.
Since the 70s, I think.
Yes. Any other news items? Okay, let me bring up my browser because I think I had one or two more items here. So I didn't include this in the links, but these were things that I just was browsing around and found shortly before we started. Everybody knows about the Chicxulub impactor that supposedly got rid of the dinosaurs. Apparently there was 650,000 years later, another 6 mile, well, the Chicxulub was 6 miles, the 650,000 years later, a mile-sized asteroid hit in the Ukraine. So it was kind of like, maybe they didn't get rid of all the dinosaurs, but maybe the second try did.
Oh, that's interesting.
So 66 million years ago was Chicxulub, and then 650,000 years later was in Ukraine. The Boltys, Boltysh asteroid. They found a 15-mile wide crater for it.
When was the impactor?
650,000 years after Chicxulub. So it's still millions of years ago.
Okay.
So they finally postulated an answer based upon observations regarding why Betelgeuse suddenly got dimmer. So when a red dwarf is getting towards the end of its life, it kind of blows off shells. And this was something they kind of thought would happen. But now we have a little bit of data that says Betelgeuse blew off a chunk, a shell. And when the shell cooled down, it essentially became stardust or ash or carbon. And as it did that, it dimmed the southern hemisphere of Betelgeuse for a while because it was rapidly moving away from Betelgeuse. And therefore, when it got far enough away, it was no longer obscuring the star's brightness. So it went back to normal brightness. So a piece of Betelgeuse. Okay, this one I found interesting that 84 million years ago, the Earth might have tipped on its side and then righted itself. Like, okay.
How come?
Well, they're saying that the inner and outer sections of the mantle of the Earth, which we know spin at slightly different speeds, got stuck. And when it got stuck, it temporarily rotated the Earth on its axis. And then when it got unstuck, it righted itself because it was still spinning. Now, when it says it tipped itself, it only tipped itself by about 12 degrees, which would basically put New York City where Florida is.
So that's why the moon is the one who stabilizes the Earth axle.
Yes.
In the case of Mars, if something happened like that, you can see that the inclination of the pole of Mars is a little bit lower than Earth because the moon keeps the system stable.
Yes. And which is it, Uranus that's flipped on its side or Neptune?
Uranus.
Uranus. Uranus is actually
Uranus is
flipped
the
almost
weird
90 degrees. Something big hit it multiple times.
It's a little bit more than 9 degrees because of the rotation. So it's like Uranus is a little bit like 6 degrees down like this.
Oh, okay.
So Venus is totally, and then Uranus is like 6 degrees.
Okay, if the Earth got mad at us and decided to get stuck again for whatever reason, or if it just
There is no
happened-
more heat for that to happen anymore.
Oh, okay. Then I won't give my.
It's cooled down enough where we're hopefully in sync.
If we had been around then, and New York moved to Florida, then we'd all be underwater. We'd all be dead, right?
Depends upon how long it took to flip it. If it flipped it over a very short period of time, yes, there would be a lot of ocean sloshing going on.
So if it went slowly,
If it went
Then there-
slowly, you might notice a magnetic field change, but that many millions of years ago, nobody had a compass. We weren't around. This is between 79 and 86 million years ago. Now,
and they
how
don't
do
know
they,
if it was.
how do they know that? Magnetic fields in fossil records.
Wow.
Who
Well,
knew?
I'm glad to hear, Helen. Thank you for telling me it can happen now.
Yeah.
Okay, and I already mentioned that they're freezing the mirrors at LIGO and realizing that when you freeze things that low and they're very large, they don't exhibit all those magical quantum states. So they're trying to figure out why not? Shouldn't they be more larger, quantum states? Okay, now I really have no more news. Okay, tonight's presentation is an overview of the AARLCC library, presentation on the biography of Benjamin Banneker, which I think you'll find interesting, and then a discussion with Lisa Jackson from the library regarding the new Juneteenth federal holiday.
Hi, welcome. I'm Héllen Távora. I am one of the instructors at Fox Observatory and also Didático Coordination. And today we have here Lisa Jackson. She's a librarian and supervisor for youth services in the library division. And she works at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the library. That's awesome. We actually visited before and we brought some of the telescopes there. And also we're going to talk about astronomer that it's very important for the cultural history of the United States. And his name is Banneker. So we're going to talk about a little bit about him. But first we start with Lisa Jackson. And she is going to talk a little bit about the library. So I have some pictures that I can show and share with everyone so we can actually have an idea about the library, and Liz is going to talk a little bit about the library. Lisa, you take over and then I will just change some of the pictures and you can talk about the library.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, again, my name is Lisa Jackson and I'm Supervisor of Youth Services here at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. The library itself opened October 26, 2002 and became the third library of its kind in the United States. Libraries similar to this one are the Schomburg Center in New York City and the Auburn Avenue Research Library in Atlanta. What makes this library different from the other two is that we circulate our materials to the general public from a collection of more than 80,000 books, artifacts, and documents. This $14 million, 60,000 square foot facility is the brainchild of the former Broward County Library Director, Samuel F. Morrison, who envisioned a place where African Americans could learn about their heritage. On the first floor, there is the Cultural Center, which has a Friends bookstore and Friends gift store. We have a large museum space, and in the picture, it's to the left behind that window on the bottom. We have a state-of-the-art auditorium that seats 300. And the auditorium is really fantastic because not only does it have the huge stage area backstage, we have dressing rooms for the stars. There's 2 stars dressing rooms, a huge dressing room for the rest of the cast of whatever play or group of people that are performing. There's a green room backstage and working bathrooms and showers. So it's a full complement of rooms that help those who are doing any types of performances at this facility. They can rest there and they can use those facilities back there to help them when they are doing their program. Here's a picture of outside of the building. This is how we all met. We periodically, we all meet and we look at the sky and try to find wonderful planets and stars and all kinds of cool things. That's my favorite part. So on the top floor of the building is the library proper. There's an adult reference section. There's a youth services section and our special collections, which houses rare books, artwork, and artifacts from people of African descent from all over the world. The most popular part of our special collections is the special collections revolving around Esther Roll, who played Florida Evans on the show Good Times back in the late 70s. She's from Pompano, and so we have a lot of her materials here. We have her Emmy in the collection also. Lots of good things. We also have an unfinished manuscript from the author of Roots, Alex Haley. His last manuscript that is unfinished is here. Youth Services has a wonderful collection of artwork from illustrators who have won the Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award, as well as a lot of images from Ashley Bryan. This library is important to the community, and it's important to the Broward County community because of its collection.
So then we are waiting for the Broward County opened, and then when it's safe for everyone to be looking through the telescopes, and we restart some of the events that we can do in the telescopes. Now we have 2 institutions that can help that. That will be Fox Observatory and the South Florida Amateur Astronomers Association. And also now we have the Broward Astronomy that will be part of those things. So we can see each other face to face eventually.
Yes.
Then because of the library gave us some of ideas what to present to commemorate the Juneteenth that is going to be on Saturday, the next Saturday. The library gave us some of the inspiration to find important historical people to talk about. And because of the, you know, the help that Lisa gave to us and also bringing links and the bibliography, we had an idea to talk about one of the important astronomers in the history of the United States.
So is there any questions about the library before we get into Benjamin Banneker?
Just I want to comment that if you ever visit the library, sometimes they have like canned presentations from other museums. So one time that we went there, they have like a whole collection of meteorites, impactites. Sometimes they have like historical artifacts. They have how you call it, the robot, the mechatronic robot from, remember they have like a model that move and talk to you.
Oh, they still have him. He's just not out front anymore.
Who was he?
He was actually
Dr. Stantra?
No, he wasn't just drunk. He was the former director of the Broward County Library System that helped to establish the library. So he was kind of an automatronic thing that when you walked up to him, your presence would start him talking, and he would explain how the library came into being and things like that. But I think that they've moved him to storage at this point.
Now, is it open now? I mean,
I don't think it's open to
all of
public just yet. I know that they have library staff back in operation at the library, but I don't know if the library is open to the public just yet. It's going to fall into the same category as any other Broward County library. So if you just go to the Broward County website, look up libraries, there'll be a general statement there regarding public access to the libraries. I suspect it won't be that long before they're open again.
Yeah, and the other thing is that they have in their storage and ARServe that they have lots of articles. They're like, it is a museum. The library is beautiful and it is totally worth it to visit. It's like they always have something to see around, and then they have the museum quality material. And then if you need anything to research there with the material, so they gave us the bibliography about Benjamin Banneker. So if you need to do some kind of research about anything about African or African American culture and art and political history, that is the best place for you to go, because if they don't have in their collection, they will point you out where you can find it.
And like Lisa mentioned, there are 2 other libraries similar to this outside of Florida that they can reach out to them and get additional cultural or historical information from them to provide you with it. The difference of this library is this library will make the information accessible to the general public. So in their second floor section, just like any other library, you can walk up and find a book or find out information. Whereas the other libraries are more archival in nature. You sort of have to make an appointment to go see something. That would be very similar to the Broward Main Library has a private section of the library that contains very old books as part of somebody's donated collection. And you have to make a request to see things in that part of the library. This library, however, is open. If it's out and available, just go in and examine it just like you would any other library. Okay, on to Benjamin Banneker.
The library gave us some of the inspiration to find important historical people to talk about. And because of the help that Lisa gave to us and also bringing links and the bibliography, we had an idea to talk about one of the important astronomers in the history of the United States. He's not just an astronomer, he was also helped with the surveying the land that became Washington, D.C. And so because of the African American Research Library, we have access to information that normally are not totally open to the public or people don't know much about it. So it's a famous astronomer. He happened to learn about astronomy not short after the American Revolution, and we became the United States of America. So I thank to Lisa and thank to the library, we had the inspiration to do a presentation about Mr. Banneker. I am like in love with him. I had no idea about it. All the what he did, who he was, and the opportunities that he lacked, but even without the opportunities, the fight that he got to acquire knowledge. So I really thank you, Lisa, because this is really amazing what you're talking about. Thank you to Lisa to give us the idea and the bibliography to research about Benjamin Banneker. So he born a little bit before the American Revolution, and he became an astronomer after the American Revolution. He was a free slave, he born free, and because he was a landowner, he had opportunities to, not just toil, and he had time to, and then he was, educated by his grandparents, at least a grandmother and mother. So thank you, Lisa, for, pointing out Benjamin Banneker, because this man was a genius and he was like amazing. So first, he worked to combat misconceptions that people had about African Americans during the colonial era of the United States and right after the American Revolution. He was autodidactic polymath, meaning he learned by himself. He had very, very little schooling, but he became a polymath. He paid attention in math and natural sciences and astronomy. He also had lucky enough to be a landowner, so he had time to dedicate to his research in knowledge, reading books. He was an avid reader, and he was a mathematician, and he was an inventor and craftsman. He was a land surveyor. Also, very important, he was an abolitionist, and he used his publications to actually, talk about the abolition. And well, we are our basic interest, because we are both amateur astronomers, we are talking about also his talent to be an amateur astronomer. He was actually, he became professional astronomer because he produced books about it. So yeah, he made money of it. So he was a professional.
I just said that his case is a very unusual case in American history, but it's just amazing, and it's wonderful how it all came together and turned out.
Yes, he was amazing. So Benjamin Banneker, born in 1731, his mother was Mary Banneker, and his father was Robert. Robert was a freed slave, and then he assumed Mary Banneker last name, but he changed a little bit, so he became Banneker. So the family became Banneker. There are two conflicting accounts of Benjamin Banneker ancestry. One is that his grandmother was African American, and the other one that she was a white slave that came from the United States as a bonded slave. But because those two problems to know, because there is no documentation. A lot of documentation was lost during a fire. So there's those two conflicting accounts of the history of Banneker. So Molly Welsh was a former servant, and when she acquired her freedom, she married a slave that she bought, Banneker, and then it says that he was royalty where he came from, and then they became landowners. So she had her land and she bought Banneker, and then later she married him, and then they became landowners, and then they had many daughters. And then Mary was one of the daughters who was mother of Benjamin. So from Molly Welsh was, the only accounts that they have was from the descendants who are, have the, just giving their deployments after, long time after the death of Benjamin and the death of Molly. So it's no documentation to actually prove that she was actual white bonded servant, a milkmaid that some people say, or if she was African American. And then, according with the Molly purchased Banneker, and then they had a farm located near Baltimore. So in 1737, Banneker was named at the age of 6 in the deed of his family, in this family land, because they were afraid that because of his color, it could give trouble for him to inherit his farm. So that's why they put his name on a deed. And then Banneker had very little formal education. because back then you have like just primary school to learn, you know, the simple operations and learn how to read. And then after that, when you grow enough to help in your farm, you have to go and work on the land. So that's basic how very little education. There was Quaker schools nearby. So there's some documentation saying that Banneker was sent to a school and he learned to read and arithmetic and you know, some stuff in school. But also there are records and that he learned to read and with the Bible by his grandmother. So there is a lot of conflicting accounts that you can have there. It says in one of the accounts that people say there is no actual documentation that about the age of 21 or 22, depending what account you're reading from the diverging biographers, that Banneker construct a wooden clock. So those two models that you see here are something that was around that time that could have been the kind of clock he constructed. So the account is that he borrowed a pocket watch and he made to scale the gears, and with his knowledge in arithmetic and his knowledge in geometry, he actually made a clock that it said that worked until his death, like basic about 50 years that the clock worked and struck on the hour precisely until his death. So what the accounts came about is that in the area where he lived, he was one of the curiosities of the wild region. That's what they said about him. So then a little bit later, like near to the age of 40 to 50 years old, is when Banneker took a long time to actually find people who like science, who like knowledge. So he had the Ellicotts, a Quaker family, a very famous Quaker family, that they came from Pennsylvania and moved to Baltimore. And then they established a grist mill nearby. So because of his intelligence and the accounts that he was a man of letters, he wrote stuff, and then he did, you know, then he became friends with the Ellicotts. The whole family was people who liked knowledge, who studied, who read. So he finally found like people like him to actually exchange knowledge. So George Ellicott was an amateur astronomer. And because he was an amateur astronomer, he lent some of his books and some of his instruments to Banneker. And then by the age of the year that he turned 58, he forecast his first eclipse. So it's between 40s and 50s, he started to get interested in astronomy. So he made his own calculations. This is the first calculation for the first eclipse. And this is the diagram for another eclipse that he put in some of his books. So here's his calculation. So someone who barely have any formal knowledge became a very good astronomer, just reading books and having people who actually exchange knowledge, exchange books. So that's why it's very important, the libraries, because the love of reading, the love of acquiring knowledge by yourself at your own leisure time, it's something beautiful and something that he was an example of human being that, you know, not just because of the difficulties of his life, and he became a very knowledgeable man because he read books. So then, because of the friendship with George Ellicott, George actually introduced Major Andrew Ellicott, and he was one of the surveyors that actually construct the Washington, D.C. So because of that, they made the Resident Act. So they were going to construct the whole capital of the United States near the Potomac. And then Major Andrew Ellicott actually invited Banneker to help in his surveyor group. And then for the first time in his life, Banneker ventured more than 10 miles out of his farm. So that's the first time he came out of his farm. He's already in his 50s when he actually started to working, in astronomy, and later on help a little bit during the surveying of Washington, D.C. There is a lot of accounts about how he helped. Some people say that he helped to remember how the whole project, because one of the architects left the project, but there is no documentation about that. But we know by letters and by some documentation that he was paid $60 as expenses for him to go to help in Washington. And also that he was paid $2 a day for his salary to work there. He worked for 3 months. So because of that, people started noticing him on the news that he was helping to construct someone and then using that as ideas for abolition. So in the Georgetown Weekly Ledger, Ellicott is attended by Benjamin Banneker, an Ethiopian, so you see the way they wrote there, whose ability as a surveyor and astronomer clearly proves that Mr. Jefferson's, the future president of the United States, concluding that the race of men were void of mental endowments was without foundation. So they started using the figure of the Benjamin Banneker to actually prove that all men is equal. All men with the same opportunities can be as intelligent as anyone else. So this is some of the pictures that you find here. This is on the left is a picture of mural of Maxine Spellbinder. The building of record deeds, there was a mural there. This building doesn't exist anymore, but there are some pictures saved in the mural. So here's Benjamin Banneker, and here he's helping, during the surveying of the land. And then the Secretary of State, Major Thomas Jefferson, commissioned Major Andrew Ellicott to actually do the survey, and then Major Andrew Ellicott asked Benjamin Banneker to help in doing that. So he was paid $60 for the expense to travel, and also he had $2 as salary, the daily salary to work there. He worked only for 3 months. So what it says of some of his biographers that his duties were making astronomical observations and calculations to establish base points. So where you're gonna put the base points, like the square of the city to be constructed, do that so you can put down the city and the project. And then you have those boundaries, putting like stones, like those that still exist today. And then you know how to project the city, to put the city on paper, and then later on put on the land. So that's how they did the surveying. So to make those stones, you need astronomical observations. And also Banneker had the function to maintain a clock. So he maintained the clock and did the astronomicals based on the time. So he could put, latitude and longitude of the markers on the land, so you would know perfectly how to project the city. So this is a picture of Major Andrew Ellicott, and then those are the markers, and this is one of the murals commemorating the foundation of the city. So then later in the same year, in April 1791, he had to come back to his land because spring was arriving, and also because he was working on his astronomical calculations for his almanac that he was producing. So he needed to go back. So basically he worked for around 3 months or so, helping doing the surveying of the land to put the future capital. So going back to his work as an astronomer. This is the first edition of his almanac. So today you can still find the Farmer's Almanac, and there are places that you can read what is going to happen today, every day for the whole year, and you can know the position of stars, the position of the planets, the moons and settings and risings, and you know the sun settings and risings. So this is very, very complicated calculation. And him, at that time, 1792, he actually did an almanac. So it's a very complex calculation. I cannot do any of those calculations. That's a very, very advanced astronomical calculation for you, especially if you don't have a computer, like I have the luxury to have a computer to do that kind of calculation. He didn't have it. He only have his observations and, you know, some of the instruments and measuring the angles to actually produce a very detailed ephemeris. So positions of objects in the sky with his simple instrumentation. So that was his first publishing. And then the interesting about those publishings, not just the position of the stuff that you see in the sky, it also have a pamphlet kind of thing. So a lot of people publishing their ideas. They did recipes for home remedies. They did advocacy for the abolition. And so there is a lot of things that they did that. Now, a lot of the people who put out the foreword for his work, you know, put like words that they are admiring Benjamin Banneker. So one of those things that people say is like, I consider this negro a fresh proof that the powers of the mind are disconnected with the color of the skin. And then the funny thing is that this annoyed him because he wants people judge his work, not use him as a token for the abolition. Because for him, his ambition, his idea is that his calculations were correct, and because of that, he wants respect as astronomer, not because he would be a token for abolition. So, and at the end here, here's what he says: I am annoyed to find that the subject of my race is so much stressed. The work is either correct or not. In this case, I believe it to be perfect. So he was kind of annoyed by people actually doing the foreword and, you know, doing the all the exaltations of this, and all he really wanted is, you know, be classified as an astronomer who did corrections or did correct calculations of that. So this is the second book. And then I actually put a little bit of this for you to actually see a little detail. So that's the second year. And then 1993, so that's the second year. And I want you to just take a look here on the bottom of the middle page. So you see the positions of the sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, the moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then 12 years before, a new planet was discovered. So the name of the new planet was Georgian Sidus, that became later named Uranus. So this, it's kind of cool because you actually see Georgian Sidus will be above Saturn. So he's actually named the new discovered planets only 12 years before. Now I choose June because of, you know, the date, the month, but this is June 1793. And then you can see here what is happening in every day, in the day of the week, and then the number of the days that you can see the details. And then you can see rises and sets. By the way, you see here, but a typo, the S's were substituted by an F. So it says rises and sets. So this is for the sun. And then you see the position of the moon in each constellation, and then settings and risings for the moon, and the phase of the moon. Over here is the phase of the moon by day. So you have the 30th day or 29th and 30th day of the moon would be the new moon, and then the cycles start all over again. You would have the full moon about 15 days, so you would have the full moon. So this is like little details that, some of the position of the planets in which constellations here. So you have the phases of the moon. So this is a really detailed thing for that time, for any man to do it. But he didn't want to be compared because of the color of his skin. He wanted to be compared with other astronomers by the knowledge, by the skill that he did in his predictions of the positions of the objects in the sky. That's what we call it, the ephemeris. So now, because of this almanac that he did, is what's also a pamphlet. A lot of people wrote forwards, wrote letters. So from this year, I found important to publish because he got annoyed by the comments that, because of the color of skin, that's extraordinary. He didn't like that. And he became annoyed, and then he got tired of it, and he decided to communicate directly with Thomas Jefferson. He was by then Secretary of State, and then he wrote a long letter from Jefferson. Jefferson was a slave owner, and then he was commenting that, in the Declaration of Independence, they were asking for freedom for all the men. So here, Benjamin Banneker uses the own words of the Declaration of Independence to pull Jefferson's ear, to stop, to abolish slavery in the United States. So in the very long letter he wrote, he actually mentioned, we hold this truth to be self-evident. You see the change of the S. We hold this truth to be self-evident. So this is one of the words that we have in the Declaration of Independence. And then, the comment is that, all the men is equal and then need to be treated. And then he also published the answer of Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson sent him back a very short letter that he basically dismissed and didn't went to detail. He just like a perfect politicians that we see nowadays that give an answer that is a no answer. And then he just stopped the conversation. Look how short is his letter. This basic two little paragraphs. Mm. And then the only thing that he did is that he found it very admirable what he did, and he sent his almanac for the Academy of Sciences of Paris, and then just basic to dismiss that. A lot of people comment that this was basic dismissal and let's not talk about. And right after that, they start landing slaves and paying to construct Washington, D.C. with a slave power, because people who own slaves actually, rented their slaves to actually construct the city. So instead to actually help with that, he totally dismissed and did nothing about it. So the other thing is that in his almanac, the predictions of eclipses, so this is very impressive. There is another publication here. So this is the 1795. And then here, a Philadelphia edition. And then they put a picture. So a lot of people thought that this picture was kind of drawings of the picture of Benjamin Banneker. So some of the models and some of the new drawings were based on this. But then later, some of the biographers concluded that this was idealized African-American youth and not really the picture of Banneker. So that is not sure if this is a picture of a Banneker, or if it is an idealized youth. So we don't know how he actually looked like. So some of the pictures that you see and some of the models of how he would look like is basically using this picture. So we don't really know how he looked like. We are not sure of that. So that's one of the latest on that. So then Banneker kept a series of journals with his dreams, observations that he did about natures. And so this, most of the documentation, most of the stuff was lost in a fire. So Banneker had only one of those who escaped from the fire. And then in this one that escaped from the fire, that was in the day of this funeral. So he actually mentions the broods that's happening right now, the cicadas that we are seeing happening today, during this month. We could even see the pictures of the cicadas in Washington DC. The X brood is actually happening right now. And then Benjamin Banneker was recollecting in this only surviving notebook that he had, that his recollections of the broods coming every 17 years in this. So it's interesting, the synergy that we are having talking about him during this time of the year is when the brood is happening, and the only book that survives is actually mentioned something that's happening right now. So I found it really cool, the coincidence where we are talking about him and one of his books and one of his notebooks and talking about that. So this is really, really cool. Now, he also mentioning about the behavior of bees. So he was interested in astronomy, in natural science, in agriculture, in irrigation. So he was a full polymath. He got curious about all kinds of science. So on the October 9, 1806, Banneker died. In his farm in Oella. So during his funeral, this is a model of how his house would look like, was destroyed during his funeral. This was really weird. People don't know how it happened. Nobody figured out what happened. The only thing that's really sad is all the stuff that he had in his house was lost. Only few things survived that was landed to other people, or some of his friends who have some of his stuff that survived. Very little stuff survived because while it was during his wake, during his funeral, his house caught fire. So this is a weird thing that happened. And then the daughter of George, Martha Ellicott, she wrote many biographies of Benjamin Banneker. She actually met him and talked about him. So that's one of the recollections that we have about him and know about him is by the daughter of his neighbor, George Ellicott, the amateur astronomer who taught him a lot of things. And then the other stories that came from John Latrobe that interview many of his friends and acquaintances and collect some of his histories about Benjamin Banneker. But he was a really impressive man. Benjamin Banneker interactions with his friends and people who he knows, so like from abolitionists like Rittenhouse or slave owners like Jefferson, show that even freed blacks never escaped the confines of race. While he was rightfully being held as an example of African-American excellence, Banneker presence is an ideological crossroads. His persistence also make his story definitely American, with no qualifiers. So basically, he didn't like to have, there is a qualifier because he's an excellence, because he's an African American. That actually annoyed him. He wouldn't be remembered And he wanted people comment about him by the prowess of his intelligence, not the color of the skin. And even people who actually exalted his intelligence, he didn't like that because they always put a qualifier, the African-American intelligent man. What he wants is to be an intelligent man. Doesn't matter which kind of qualifier. So that was really impressive. Thank you so much, Lisa, to introduce me to Benjamin Banneker. If it wasn't you, I wouldn't even know his existence. So, you know, I'm confessing my own lack of knowledge of important people in the United States. So that's a very, very impressive man. By the way, this is another drawing of him. It is the idealized drawing. We actually don't know how he looked like. But here is some of the bibliography that I collected, some of the places that I use for this presentation. The best one, my favorite one, is the one that has the White House history, that has all the explanations based in documentations about him and explain some of the myths. And then this is a picture of one of the stamps that has his picture, a drawing about him, and you know, him doing the surveying of the Washington, and some of the pictures that he dressed as a Quaker. So this is one of the stamps. We might even try to acquire one for the library. That would be an awesome idea.
Yes.
And then now we're gonna have a little discussions and talk about things about, you know, humanity. And I have like a few comments later on.
Okay, so let me see if I can unmute here. Okay, I've muted everyone, so if anybody wants to speak up about Benjamin Banneker and the biography of him, if there's any questions, we can cover that before we get into an explanation and discussion of Juneteenth and the background flag that you see there.
Because I was the one who actually researched the whole thing. So if you have any questions specifics about Benjamin Banneker, feel free to ask. I guess they're sleeping.
Well, a couple of that actually saw it in the previous session, did leave, but I guess these people.
Okay, one of
No
the things that
questions.
just gave me like a little bit of a, you know, not a cricket, but a cicada in the back of my ear, is that fire, the loss of all the documentation. I think he spoke, you know, a big tiger like Thomas Jefferson, and they found a way to erase him from the history. But this is only my personal opinion. That is nothing that can prove that fire was malicious or not, but I think it was. It's just my feeling for what I read is that they want to erase him.
Well, remember back then they didn't have any electrical lighting, so if there was any lighting required, it was open candles, which are notorious for causing house fires. Okay, now we'll get into the section on Juneteenth, and then once that's done, we'll do our normal open discussion session.
I'm gonna go and just show you a little bit more things than to actually talk about Juneteenth and interesting things that I found it. So it opened up what we're gonna talk about, you know, as a free conversation. So this is the Juneteenth flag, and it's also related to astronomy. So the star is not also meaning that the last state where you have the Union soldiers coming to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's the star. And also it represents the free Americans and the future, and the star that represents the rest of the Americans, the freedom of all the 50 states in America. And then the burst here is an outline of a nova. So this is like also, a star that's like exploding and expanding and feeding new materials to in space to form new planets. And in the meaning of the nova is the representing a new beginning. So that's kind of interesting, the relation. And then the flag is not a straight line, it's actually a horizon. So it's a curved horizon. So it means that new opportunities for African Americans in the future after the proclamation of the emancipation. And then the red, white, and blue is the American flag, and also the date when the soldiers arrived in Galveston to actually tell everyone the good news. So this is one of the things. The other thing related to the same thing is Polaris, the North Star. I took this from the National Parks website. So this information is one of the links. And then it shows the Polaris was the Freedom Star, because when people want to escape from slavery, when they want to leave, bondage, they actually try to escape, and they need to go to north, where freedom was. So they actually use the Big Dipper or the drinking gourd, and use the last two stars and point to the North Star, Polaris. And so this is basically pointing exactly north. So if you follow the star, you're walking towards to freedom, going to the north. So I found this really beautiful. And another thing that we should, discuss a little bit about, the ideas of freedom and the ideas of opportunity, equal opportunity to everyone. So, Lisa, do you have any comments or anything that you want to talk about Juneteenth or Benjamin Banneker?
Well, it is very fitting that we talk about Benjamin Banneker during Juneteenth, because he was sort of living the way that people of African descent, African Americans, wanted to live at the time. So, I just wrote a few notes from your presentation. It's really interesting that there is no picture of Benjamin Banneker. I didn't think about that, but and there probably is not an illustration or some type of artwork, a drawing of his face. So it's just kind of, it's like, wow, I wonder what he really looked like. And maybe someday, 100 years from now, there will be some new technology that allows us to see what he looks like. I love old pictures, and so it just kind of bugs me that I don't know what he looks like. And I did want to remark on his beautiful, gorgeous handwriting. I'm from the old school where, we took penmanship class and we learned how to write in cursive, and it's beautiful.
I actually did that during the pandemic. I actually learned how to use that. I don't know if you can be able to see it. Like I kind of learned.
Not with your green screen.
Yes, my green screen is putting like. I actually tried to learn how to do, it's not appearing. So it took me this year to actually, because I found it beautiful too. I actually bought like a fountain.
Like calligraphy? Did you get the calligraphy pins?
I did that during one thing I did that was useful during the pandemic.
I'm sure you did more. So let's talk about Juneteenth.
Okay, yes.
Juneteenth is a happy celebration. First and foremost, it is a celebration of freedom and a celebration of hope. at the time when the soldiers, the Union soldiers finally got to Galveston, Texas, and those last group of folks who were enslaved learned that they were free, it was just a wonderful, wonderful event in American history. It was a time of lots of hope. People were thinking about all kinds of things, what they could do, what they could be in life, the things that they could accomplish and could acquire. It's just a wonderful celebration, and that's why we hope that the entire country celebrates Juneteenth, because really it's a testament and a testimony to all of Americans' wants for freedom and for good life and for self-determination, or Kujichagulia, as we say during Kwanzaa. So that's why I really love this holiday. And so the holiday is not just for people of African descent, it's for everyone, because everyone is being affected by it. As we can see, Benjamin Banneker had all these great skills. He was super bright, a genius, many would say. Imagine how many other people who were enslaved had that same ability had they been given the opportunity. So, you know, it sort of is something that can tell us today, living how we're living now, that we really need to give all children an equal chance to thrive. The human brain is a wonderful thing. All kids, most kids have a natural curiosity, and you can help them learn, help them be more curious by reading to them, by looking at the stars, all kinds of interesting activities that you can do to help children become more curious, because that's what we need. We need children who are curious, who want to learn, who want to make a difference. So I really enjoyed learning about the different parts of the flag, the symbolism. It's like kismet that we're talking, because it's like Benjamin Banneker, Juneteenth, the supernovas. I mean, just all of this just fits together. And then
the locusts coming in the same time.
Can you
What a
believe
coincidence.
that? Can you believe that?
Yes, it's
That's
like
crazy.
awesome.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yes.
So I love the fact that you brought up the information about the flag. One thing I would like to add to that is that Juneteenth celebrations are typically feasting, time to feast. And some people say that because at the time, folks who were enslaved, they did all of the cooking, but they only were able to eat the scraps. And when I say scraps, I mean things like pig skin and snouts and things that just weren't delicious that they had to eat. And so when we celebrate Juneteenth, we eat rich foods that the enslaved could not eat. One of the favorite drinks is strawberry soda. That was
Never
a
tried.
soda. It sounds yummy, doesn't it? And it was a soda, a drink that whites could drink, but the slaves could not. And so that's just a matter of just having everything that you couldn't have before and remembering and celebrating. Ways that we can celebrate are to harken back to those days, play games like the 3-leg race, tug of war, get your friends together and play old style games, do barbecue cookouts. I've seen places that have a Mr. and Miss Juneteenth celebration where the children either do performances or they read poetry, and they are chosen, one boy and one girl, to represent the Juneteenth future. So there's lots and lots of ways to celebrate Juneteenth. I just encourage people to get out, learn about it, and celebrate, because it's a fabulous part of our American history.
Yes. So it's basically like another 4th of July. Juneteenth and 4th of July would be the same kind of celebrating freedom.
That's it.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing that I kind of comment very fast, so just one more things for us to comment, is that one time I was on Big Cypress, and I was having a astronomy event, and some of the rangers on Big Cypress, they were commenting about Polaris. Polaris is the North Star. And then I had no idea that the North Star was the Freedom Star. When the lady was explaining that they used to locate the North to escape, I was like bawling. I was crying because it was a beautiful story. Because I only knew as a star, as actually it has a double star. It has another one together. But all I needed was the astronomical data about Polaris, and not really the historical meaning, the feeling, the freedom, I was so like emotional for me to listen to that, to learn about that part of the history, because I didn't go to high school here. So I have a lot of historical deficiencies in my knowledge. And then when someone told me that, I was like, oh.
Well, I'll tell you, I did grow up here. I was born here, and it was never, the two were never connected. We talked about Polaris, which was just Polaris. They talked about the North Star, but they never connected the two. So when you talked to me about it, it was like, oh, that's right. This was just last week when you were talking to me about it. And it just came together in my brain at that point. Polaris is the North
So
Star.
if you want more information about that, if you search Polaris, the Freedom Star online, or if you use the links that will be on the video at the end of the video, you can look at the whole reporting and some of the pictures talking about Julia Tubman, and so you can read with a little bit more detail the meaning, and that is even the song about it. So it's to commemorate the escape to freedom. It is a really beautiful story that I love that.
Yeah, I do too. Very cool. And I have to thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, so concluding that, thank you so much, Lisa, to explain Juneteenth and say that's a happy celebration. Thank you also so much to introduce me to Benjamin Banneker. I am in love with him. He is super genius, awesome. And then if you want us to do anything in the library, Fox Observatory or Broward Astronomy, just contact us. Feel free to contact us. And then if you have any events or anything in the library happening, please tell us, because it would be a pleasure to when we finally, see in person again.
Well, I would like to thank you for contacting me. This has been really a fun chance to talk about Juneteenth. I don't know that enough people know about it, so I'm so glad that your followers will be learning about it. I appreciate learning new things, and this has just been fantastic. I would like to thank you all, both of you, for coming to the African American Research Library when you knew to expose our children to the celestial wonders that we have above us that we sometimes don't look at, and inspiring a whole new generation to look up and look to the sky. I appreciate you guys.
That was really good. Very educational.
There was a lot of research put into it, and we took some time to do the presentation and to edit in additional information and then post it. I actually posted it on my YouTube site, on Broward Astronomy YouTube site, as a private video, and passed the link around within Broward County Library System for them to review and approve the content, because we were talking about the library. And it didn't take long after I posted it. We had like 8 people that had viewed it within Broward County Library System. And the verdict came back, yes, it's great. Yes, post it. And we gave the other astronomy group the kind of first presentation dibs on presenting it, because Héllen is still educational coordinator for them. But it's available now publicly on the Broward Astronomy site. I will say that I posted both to my YouTube page and to Hellen's the additional links as text, so you don't have to look at the video, stop it, and try and type in what you see on the screen. The links are all available. I posted the link to the YouTube video in case it was glitchy on your end, or you want to go back and look at something. In the email I sent out has the YouTube link directly, so you can see it directly.
The other group did play the video, but the audio was non-existent for the first half hour. I dropped out and I didn't stay for the rest of it.
Okay. As you can tell, you have to watch these things like a hawk, and you have to do start, stops, confirms that things are working while you're recording in order to, you know, put the best foot forward, so to speak. So,
So first, I want to mention that it was so awesome that we thought about this kind of presentation, and synergy happens. And like, you know, you find that in his books, there are cicadas, and then there are cicadas around when we are presenting that. You find out that, you know, we inspired talking about him because he was an abolitionist. So we should be talking about during the Juneteenth celebration. And then this was just an advocacy for in the future, make Juneteenth a holiday like that. And that happens this week. And like, that was amazing, full of like little coincidences of everything that we did, that it was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. That was so cool.
Well, Juneteenth itself has been celebrated not as a federal holiday, but internally for over 100 years. And they've been trying to make it a federal holiday since the 1970s. And unbeknownst to us, we recorded this video on Tuesday, and I was, edited and pushed it around on late Wednesday. And lo and behold, Thursday, the president signs it off. That's great. And we were thinking, oh, it's going to be on Saturday when we're doing the presentation. And then we learned that, no, it's a federal holiday. So if it's going to be on a Saturday, you hold it on the Friday before. So it was officially yesterday. But,
super awesome.
As the saying goes, I love it when the planets align.
It totally aligned. It was amazing.
We didn't plan it to fall this well.